All right, you guys. So onward to section 3. Let's go. If x minus 1 over 3 equals k and k equals 3, what's the value of x? Let's substitute 3 for k. You'll get x minus 1 over 3 is equal to 3. Multiply both sides by 3. X minus 1 is equal to 9. That means x is equal to 10d. For I equals the square root of negative 1, what is the sum of 7 plus 3i plus parentheses negative 8 plus 9i? Great. If they throw an I question at you, don't be scared by it. Just treat it as if it's x and solve it accordingly. The only time that it would be different is if you had an I squared, in which case you'd want to change it into negative 1. But that's not what's going on in this question. It's a lot more straightforward. So the 7 and the negative 8 will become negative 1, so the answer is A or B. The 3i and the plus 9i are going to become 12i, so A. 3. On Saturday afternoon, Armand sent M text messages each hour for 5 hours, and Tyrone sent P text messages each hour for 4 hours. Which of the following represents the total number of messages sent by Armand and Tyrone on Saturday afternoon? So if he sent M messages each hour for 5 hours, Armand's, the equation, I suppose, that would represent Armand would be 5m, and then the one for Tyrone would be 4p, so 5m plus 4pc. 4. Kathy is a repair technician for a phone company. Each week, she receives a batch of phones that need repairs. The number of phones that she has left to fix at the end of each day can be estimated with the equation P equals 108 minus 23D, where P is the number of phones left and D is the number of days she's worked that week. What's the meaning of the value 108 in this equation? Well, I can kind of stress test this equation, I think. If D, the number of days, is equal to 0, that would tell me that P, the number of phones, is equal to 108. So that translates to if Kathy hasn't worked for any days, so 0 days, then the number of phones that she has left to fix would be 108. And so the answer would be B. Nice. 5, which of the following is equivalent to the expression above? Well, we could plug in, but I think that this is going to be a situation where algebra is probably the smoother way to go. So let's just combine like terms, I think. X squared y minus negative x squared y is going to become 2x squared y, so I know the answer is C or D. I'm curious to see, between C and D, I can see D has the negative 6y squared, so let's see if that's something that's actually going to occur when we combine these guys. I'm just going to look up top for the y squared term, so that we have negative 3y squared, negative 3y, that would be nothing, so then C. 6. A pediatrician uses the model above to estimate the height of a boy in inches in terms of the boy's age A in years between the age of 2 and 5. Based on the model, what is the estimated increase in inches of a boy's height each year? Kind of similar to the way that we did question 4. I can sort of stress test this equation. So if A, the number of years, is, say, 2, then the boy's height would be 34.6. I'll just substitute the value of 2 in for A. They asked what happens when you increase it by a year. So let's say his age increases from 2 to 3. Let's see what happens when we plug in A is 3. You'll get 9 plus 28.6, which is 37.6. It increased by 3, so A. 7 looks insane, but let's see. The formula above gives the monthly payment M needed to pay off a loan of P dollars at R% annual interest over N months. Which of the following gives P in terms of M, R, and N? Oh, nice. So they're kind of trying to scare us, I think. But essentially what this question boils down to is M is equal to a fraction times P. And if you wanted to isolate the P on the right-hand side, then you would just flip over this fraction that's being multiplied to it and multiply it to the other side. Or you would multiply each side with its inverse, whichever one is, whichever concept you're more okay or familiar with. So then in this case, the fraction would simply flip over as it went to the M side, so then it would be B. 8. If A over B equals 2, what's the value of 4B over A? I'm sure there are lots of ways to tackle this, but just in general, a good thing to do is if you have fraction equaling a fraction, then cross-multiply them. I know that this is fraction equal to number, but number technically is 2 over 1, so let's just see if that gets us anywhere. So you would get A is equal to 2B. If A is equal to 2B, we can substitute that in for the A in the second equation. You'll get 4B over 2B is equal to what? The answer is 2. What's the solution, x, y, to the system of equations above? Cool. You can, nice of them to give us points that you could literally plug in if you weren't sure or confident doing either substitution or elimination, but I'm a big fan of elimination. I find that a lot of times when students do substitution, they can be more prone to making like a sign error because they forgot to like distribute it whenever you substitute a value into the second equation. I guess in this case, one thing to note is that the second equation's x and y are sort of like flipped. So let's make sure that we take that into account when we solve it. I'm going to multiply the second equation by 2 to get the y's to match up. You get negative 2x plus 4y is equal to negative 38. Then we can subtract the 4y and the 4y, so we can subtract those two equations from one another. That would give me 3x minus negative 2, so 5x is equal to negative 23 minus negative 38, so 15. X is equal to 3. Answer has to be B because that's the only one where x is 3. Nice. 10, for the function g defined above, a is a constant and g of 4 equals 8. What's the value of g of negative 4? Okay, so then if they gave us g of x and then they tell us later on that that's g of 4, like they took the x that was in the parentheses and changed it into 4, what that's telling us to do is to go back to the function g of x and change all of the x's associated with it into 4. So I'm going to do that up in the question that they gave us up top. So g of 4 means, like I said, change all the x's into 4. So we'll get g of 4 is equal to a times 4 squared plus 24. So we get g of 4 is equal to 16a plus 24. Great. Now that we have that aspect of the question done, we can also notice that they told us that g of 4 is equal to 8. So I can get that 16a plus 24 and set that equal to 8. If I do that, I'll get 16a is equal to negative 16. So a is going to be negative 1. So something that I can fill in now. I don't have to deal with this equation presenting a. I know that a is equal to negative 1. They said it's a constant, so it's not going to change. Let's see if we can move on to the g of negative 4 aspect. So g of negative 4, just like the g with 4, what that means is go to g of x and change all of the x's into negative 4. So I'm going to do that, plus I'm going to keep in mind that a is actually equal to negative 1. I don't have to deal with a anymore. So if I plug g of negative 4 into the equation above, you get g of negative 4 is equal to negative 1 times negative 4 squared plus 24. Negative 1 times negative 4 squared. It's very important to make sure that you square the negative 4 first before you multiply it by negative 1. Right? Order of operations. PEMDAS tells us that exponents occur. You would solve exponents before you do multiplication. So the negative 4 squared would become 16, and then minus 1 times 16 would be negative 16. Plus 24 would be 8, so the answer is A. Nice. 11. In the equation above, B and C represent the price per pound in dollars of beef and chicken, respectively, X weeks after July 1st during last summer. What was the price per pound of beef when it was equal to the price per pound of chicken? Talking is hard sometimes. Okay, so then what they want us to do here is to set these two equations equal to one another. Now, if I do, I'm going to move all the x's to one side and all the numbers to the other side. Solve for x. I believe you'd get a 2.35 minus 1.7 is 0.6. That would be equal to 0.15 x. 0.15 is equal to 6. That would be 4. 0.6 is equal to 1.15. So that'd be 4. X is equal to 4. We can plug in x is equal to 4 into the equation to figure out what y is, given that that's what they were asking us for, the price. If x is equal to 4, I'm going to plug it into the top equation, I think, because 0.25 times 4 turns into 1 very nicely. And so the price would be 2.35 plus 1, which is 3.35d. 12. A line in the xy plane passes through the origin and has a slope of 1/7. Which of the following points lie on the line? Oh, okay, nice. So we know the equation for a line is going to be y equals mx plus b. And if it passes through the origin, that would mean that it's b, the y-intercept is 0. So now the equation of a line is y equals mx plus 0. So y equals mx. If the slope is 1/7, now the equation is y equals 1/7 x. And we can use the points in the answer choices to stress test this answer, the equation that we just made, to see which one of them would derive a true statement. So if the point is a point that would belong on that line, it's a point that would give us a true statement when we plug it into the equation. So if I plug in a 0.7 into y equals 1/7 x, you'll get 7 is equal to 1/7 times 0, so 7 is equal to 0. Last time I checked, not a true statement. For b, you would get 7 is equal to 1/7. Not so good. For C, you'd get 7 is equal to 1, also not so good. And for D, you get 2 is equal to 2, which is correct, so D. For 13, if x is greater than 3, which of the following is equivalent to 1 over x plus 2 plus 1 over x plus 3? Okay, so the algebraic way would be to set a common denominator of x plus 2 times x minus 3. That would mean that the left-hand fraction in the denominator would turn into x plus 3 over x plus 2 times x plus 3, and the right hand would be x plus 2 over x plus 2, and then so they would combine. You would have to flip them over. Since it's 1 over those, the answer would be B. Now, I know that for some people that can be a little bit uncomfortable, and so thankfully we have the plug-in strat to help us here. We can simply plug in x is equal to 4, simplify the equation in the directions up there, and then see which one of the answer choices is equivalent to it when x equals 4. So if x equals 4, then I can turn the top equation to 1 over 1/6 plus 1/7. 1 over 1/6 plus 1/7 would turn into 1 over 13/42, 42, whatever the word is, and 1 over 13/42 would flip over to 42 over 13. The answer that would have a 13 in the denominator is obviously can't be C or D, so then the answer is B. 2 times 4 is 8 plus 5, 13. For 14, if 3x minus y equals 12, what's the value of 8 to the x over 2 to the y? Exponent question makes me think that I want to reduce these bases down to like similar values. Like I noticed one of them is 8 to the something and the other exponent is 2 to the something. It'd be really nice if they were both 2 to the something. So I think I can convert the 8 into 2 cubed. Now, so that just means wherever I see an 8, I can just replace that with 2 cubed. That would mean that this fraction now becomes 2 cubed to the x over 2 to the y, which is the same as 2 to the 3x over 2 to the y. Now, 2 to the 3x divided by 2 to the y can be simplified into 2 to the 3x minus y. It's like a property of exponents. 2 to the 3x minus y is going to be the same as 2 to the 12 because they told us earlier that 3x minus y equals 12, so A. 15, ax plus 2 is bx plus 7 equals 15x squared plus cx plus 14 for all values of x, and a plus b equals 8. What are the so great, we have a gross equation equaling a gross equation. This means that it's likely a compare coefficients question. So comparing coefficients questions tell us that we should simplify each or one of the sides of the equation so that it resembles the other one. Usually you want to simplify the more complicated one. So I don't want to try to factor the right-hand side and make it into parentheses form to match the left. I think I'm just going to FOIL out the left to make it match the right. Now, once I've done that, the comparing coefficients sort of rule is that the x squared coefficients on the left are going to have to equal the x squared coefficients on the right-hand side of the equation. The x on the left has to equal the x on the right, and the constant on the left would have to equal the constant on the right. So as soon as I start foiling this out, I notice that I get an abx squared. The abx squared is going to be the only x squared term that I get on the left-hand side of this equation. That means that abx squared, like I was saying earlier, has to equal that 15x squared on the right. So a times b has to equal 15. They also tell me that a plus b is equal to 8 here. So that means that now I have a bunch of characteristics for a and b. A times b is 15 and a plus b is 8. The two numbers that I can think of that would make that work are like 5 and 3 or 3 and 5. I don't know what the order of them are. I'm going to test out maybe a is 5 and b is 3 first. Now, if we run that into the equation up top, you'll notice that the x coefficients, the ab coefficients will still turn into 15x squared, which match. Then the x coefficients will become something like 35x plus 6x, which is 41x. And that would be the only x coefficient on the left-hand side, meaning that x coefficient would have to equal the x coefficient on the right. So 41x would have to equal cx, 41 would equal c. The answer would be D. That's the only one that gives us a 41. The 31 comes from if rather than setting a is 5 and b is 3, if we set it the other way around. So if a is 3 and b is 5, then the x coefficient becomes 31. And that's where the other number in answer choice D comes from. Nice. 16, it looks like classic difference of squares. So t is greater than 0 and t squared minus 4 equals 0. What's the value of t? So a squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. So t squared minus 4 is going to be t plus 2 times t minus 2. So t is 2. I can't put negative 2. You can't grid in negative numbers in this version of the test, in this part of the test ever. So 2, easy. 17. A summer camp counselor wants to find a length x in feet across a length as represented in the sketch above. The lengths represented by AB, EB, BD and CD, okay, on the sketch are determined to be 18, 14, 700, 800. 18, 14, 700. Okay, so that's nice because EB is going to correspond with BD, given that these are similar triangles. The reason you can tell they're similar triangles is that angle B on the right and left are going to have to be congruent angles because they're vertical angles. That's just like a rule. They told us that D is equal to E. And then so if both of these triangles have two angles that are equal, then the third angle in each one is also going to have to be equal. So that means that angle A is equal to angle C, thus proving that this is a similar these are similar triangles. Now the ratio between the two, like BD is 700 and EB is 1400, I believe they said. Yep. So then it's going to, the smaller triangle is going to be like 2 times smaller than the large one. EB is 1400 divided by 2 corresponds to the 700. Let's see what they're asking for. Segments AC and DE intersect at B. Okay, we knew that. And angle AEB and angle CDB have the same. They were nice enough to mark that for us. A lot of times they don't, and then so if they provide you with information like that, like the numbers, for example, I'll be sure to write it whenever I show you the actual sheet. It can be really helpful to write down whatever information that they provide you. Just give yourself that visual aid so that you're not sort of having to do things in your head like I am now. This is super risky. So, so let's see. The same measure. What's the value of x? Well, if we know that DC is 800, I believe they said, then AE is going to be twice that, given that we know that the small triangle is half the size of the big triangle, so 1600. Nice. 18, according to the system of equations above, what's the value of x? Well, we could multiply the top one by 2, I suppose. You could also just subtract them from each other to solve for y first. Either one is fine. Let's multiply the top one by 2, I guess. So 2x plus 2y is equal to negative 18. 2x plus 2y is equal to negative 18. Great. So we can subtract those two equations from one another. You'll get x is equal to negative 18 plus x is equal to 7. Nice. Like I said, doing things in your head, super risky. Obviously, if you're doing the real test, write it down. I haven't figured out a way to do annotations on screen while still looking at the camera. I'm technologically challenged, so I'm still trying to figure that out. All right, so 19, in a right triangle, one angle measures x, where sine of x is 4/5. What's cosine of 90 minus x? This is going to be 4/5. I know it looks kind of complicated, but this is that classic trig theorem, I suppose, is what the SAT would call it. I don't know. A lot of times they throw this at us to look scary. It's the rule where if x plus y equals 90 degrees, then sine of x equals cosine y. Now, cosine 90 minus x is just another way of saying y if you know that x plus y equals 90. So if you take the equation x plus y equals 90, subtract x from both sides, you get y is equal to 90 minus x. So a lot of times, instead of just saying cosine y, they'll say what y is equal to. So they'll say what cosine of 90 minus x to look even scarier. But they're not going to fool us. We just know that it's the same thing. It's that principle, so it's 4/5. 20, if a equals 5 root 2 and 2a equals root 2x, what's the value of x? Okay, so then we're just going to substitute that 5 root 2 into the second equation for 2a. You're just going to 10 root 2 equals root 2x. In order to solve for x, that means that 10 on the left-hand side, outside of the square root, is going to have to account for the x that's inside of the square root. The x on the inside of the square root would have to be 10 squared. That would allow you to remove it from the square root, thus giving you like 10 root 2. So x is 100. Nice. Well, section 4 coming right up. Onwards.